Well, welcome again, everybody. My name is Jason Blyskal, and this is my studio here at Golden Belt. This is where I make my happy little messes, looking a little cleaner today. I got lots of stained glass in the works. That's my main medium. So yes, it's a good place to display all of my work as it is made. I got a bunch of sun catchers on this wall, which are something that I do fairly regularly. Some of them are from previous exhibitions that I had done, like this one on the left here and this one on the right were made kind of around the same time, just in just kind of riffing on some geometric, funky ideas, whereas the two in the middle I got here were from a floral exhibition, or floral-themed exhibition, I should say, that I had a few years ago here. So it was a cool way to practice some kind of more traditional floral motifs in stained glass, which have been around forever. But I'm very much of the camp of getting kind of funky with it. This piece is probably one of my favorites in recent creation. Lots of squigglies. As I mentioned earlier, this one has a funny story in that this one piece was a very challenging one to cut by hand without a special tool to help out, and I got it. It was great. I got the piece together, but of course in the photographing process, it fell and it broke just that piece. So, it just comes with the territory, but what can you do? It still looks great and I love it. And I love to make some mirrors. I've made several mirrors in my time. This is a pretty simple design with some nice poppy colors, but mirrors are always fun. A fun addition to a house. This is another kind of patchworky piece I'll probably be working into the quilt exhibition. This is a currently emptier than normal section where I usually put more smaller works like accessories. These normally my night lights, which I think, let's see if it's still plugged in here, just to get a little flavor. Oh, it was already on. Voila, 2 night lights ready to go. I've had like 12 or so designs at some point in time, but the tiny ones are a little hard to keep up with. Make Christmas ornaments like bolos and necklaces and things like that. This is just a fun project I worked on during the pandemic, a little miniature paper, very different from the glass works that I normally do, but it was a very satisfying project to work on. And then just kind of a smattering of other things on the wall over here. Used to do more woodworking stuff, and I still periodically do, but yeah, that was a very fun series I worked on. And some collages as well, and a couple more sun catchers. Paperwork is, a fun thing to do at home as opposed to glasswork, which I kind of need to do here because of the mess and the hazards it comes with. And yes, this is also where I've started to hoard my television supply, which is a fun, series I've been working on where I get these old school, retro televisions, and I kind of gut out all of the insides and the screen, and I put a piece of stained glass that I will fashion and then make a light box out of it, kind of similar to this on the wall. So that's a fun way to utilize an old piece of furniture that usually just ends up in the trash. Then I got my big old marquee on the wall, which has been functioning kind of as my moniker as long as I've been doing art, night owl creations. I just love owls, and it just kind of felt right. So that's been the show so far. What else do I got? These are the last 2 I think I got in the studio. The one on the bottom is, I think, one of my more recent sun catchers. Very cool, incongruous, asymmetrical shapes playing with. This one kind of reminds me, it has a little bit of a bird shape in there, but it's not too suggestive. It's just it's there if you see it, and it's not if you don't. And I got this fun geometric one up here as well. This one was I guess I was kind of inspired by some maybe Moroccan tile designs, like repeating shapes and how many different shapes you can make with just one version of it. So that was fun. It's not quite a triangle, and it makes triangles and hexagons. So that was a fun exercise. And then here is where I keep all of my mess. So yes, with glasswork, it's I know several artists who have if you run a pretty tight ship, But it comes with glass. As you have it, it gets smaller and smaller, and you got to put it somewhere. And I find ways to use them however small they get. So I usually have my big pieces down here, and they, as they get smaller, I work them into color-coded boxes, and I'll pull from that. And then when they get so small that I really can't do anything with them, I put them in this giant bin, and then that's my rainy day fund, if you will. One way that I've utilized some small pieces, which I think is cool, and it would be neat to see more glass artists try, is this kind of mosaic style. This was kind of a like proof of concept sort of thing, where this is actually all of my scrap glass that has been fabricated not too much since it had been broken down originally, and it's sandwiched in between two panes of glass. So it's actually not grouted like a typical mosaic. It's just like a free-floating one, but it doesn't move because they're all like kind of puzzle pieced in. So it's a cool way to use like pieces of glass that you wouldn't normally use. So yeah, that one's, I've since made other projects like that. I made these kind of church windows, but that was the first one, and I enjoyed it. I think it was a cool way to get all of my trash used. So that's my little space. And I'll be making a mess of it soon. Oh yeah, and I do have one that we're working on today in conjunction with a quilt exhibition. This kind of thinking of barn quilt designs, which are, if you're a North Carolinian, you probably see them all over on the side of the road. So this is a slightly busier design than most barn quilts, I suppose. But yes, got lots of fun colors on there. I put a mirror to have a little extra functionality to it. And yeah, gonna try and include this one with the quilt exhibition. So I'm really excited to get this one hot off the press. My moniker is Night Owl Creations. I've been kind of going under Night Owl Creations since the start of it all. It's just kind of been my spirit animal, and it turned into a business name somehow. Yeah, that's also my Instagram name. Except it's night.owl.creation. Someone beat me to the punch on that one, so I'll take what I can get. So I'm originally from Miami, Florida, and I moved to North Carolina in 2015. So I was in Carborough at the time, and I kind of just had a home studio there. So when I moved to Durham about 2017 or 18, I transferred my home studio from there to Durham, and I was just kind of looking around for a space kind of like this. So this was really centrally located to my house, and yeah, it was much better to make a mess somewhere else than where you live. So that was definitely what inspired me to try and branch out. So this really has been working out nicely. I've been here for about 2.5 years, I believe now. And it's been great. Yeah, lucky to have all of the amenities the studio has to offer, and just kind of free reign to kind of do my thing. Sometimes, you're not aware of the factors that are present in your life, and like I feel like most of the time I've been doing art and enjoying all of these other things that I'm now realizing inspired that I wasn't really aware of it, but yeah, I'm like big into. I was always a big cartoon person. I love video games, and I think stylistically speaking, pulling from those, like the motifs that I enjoy most are like geometric, abstraction, very poppy and colorful sort of things. Yeah, so those are definitely big players in my design process. I try not to have anything be too subjective. I like something to kind of, maybe look like something a little bit, but not to necessarily make it exactly that. I like to dance around something, and art and functionality are two big players in my creative process. I like to, whenever I'm making something, I like to first ask, what's the purpose of this going to be? So sometimes I'll end up creating just for creating's sake, just having fun, and but a lot of times I like to thinking of who might end up with my art, if anyone. I like to think of how they'll be utilizing it. So I do, like with sun catchers, which have been kind of a mainstay in my glass sort of process. That started out like, people can put that in a window, and it's not only bringing joy because they like the way it looks, but it's also, you know, changing up their lighting situation at home. So I like thinking of things that way. And as you mentioned, I make accessories periodically, which I sell at the museum. So I'll do things like bolos or night lights and other like wearables, just because I like, you know, trying to, have a couple different outlets and points of accessibility as well. So, I mean, like I mentioned before, I started just on paper, as most artists probably get their start. And then, yes, I guess it worked its way through paper, and then ended up at wood somehow pretty drastically after that. I had taken some woodworking classes in school. So, yeah, so woodworking. And then I started from my woodworking turning things into lights. Naturally looking for other vehicles and vessels to transmit light, I found stained glass to be a good medium for that. And once I kind of discovered that, I started to think of all the different applications of glass. So that one kind of stuck around. Believe it or not, I went to school for business. If I could do it all over again, I might choose a few more art classes, just, you know, to maybe have a little bit more to show for it. But either way, I was able to practice both and graduate and make my parents happy, and you know. So but it has known many different forms. And as I'm always having this conversation with like fellow artist friends. Like when I was like back in high school, I feel like my imagination was so much more different then than it is now, especially since I've seen like how one commodifies art, turns it into a business. You end up finding different ways to do it, and like I feel like I was very uninhibited in high school. I just drew whatever came to mind, and it felt very natural, and I didn't have a whole lot of like reservations or hang-ups about it. But now when I begin my process, it might seem more refined on the outside, but it's a lot more like restrained and restrictive in certain ways. So I have to remind myself to play and break some of those boundaries. So it's been about 2.5 years since I've been at Golden Belt. There's about, I think, 25, 27 of us here. We're all kind of passing ships in the night. There's, you know, some folks who are here all the time. Really good community, and a bunch of different walks of life art-wise. We have lots of people who do, you know, more traditional style painting. There's a handful of abstract painters in the mix-up as well. But it is cool, you know, just like walking around the studios. Obviously, I'm in mine often, in my, just in my own head. But just getting out and seeing what everyone else is making is just a healthy reminder of just like the variety of artists we have in the community. So I like to, one of my favorite things to do in my practice, and I get to do at work at the museum often, is just talking to people about their art. So I think just like, you know, the discourse and dialogue we have, it probably shapes my art more than I realize. You know, I find things that look cool in the world, and I try and work them into my own practice, and I'll write down lists of applications of things. Not so much, you know, sometimes it'll be a little bit more ethereal, just like kind of bottle lightning. But like, you know, be like, on my list I'll write, I want to make a series of sun catchers. I'd like to make a series of bolas. So I can kind of see like my menu, if you will. It's kind of transactional at starting out. And then once I kind of have like my schedule and trajectory, I'll pick one to start and put on my plate. And then from there, I'll, you know, kind of get a mood board going, pick a couple color palettes and sort of shapes that I like most. And then just start kind of sketching in my sketchbook from there. So it starts on the macro scale, and I kind of boil it down. I sell things at the museum store, and I kind of do more of my experimental work here. It all happens here, but I like to, for the museum store, I try and have things that are more accessible, so that when folks are walking in, they can kind of see what you know, my style is like and what glass is capable of, and to start maybe thinking of how they'd like to enjoy that in their life. For when I'm working here, I start thinking of sort of bigger projects and installations. This year I've definitely been trying to think of from a more installation heavy stance. So I'd say the two sort of projects I'm working on are we have this upcoming quilt exhibition at the museum. So I've been thinking of a few offerings that I could sell at the store that are quilt or, you know, patchwork themed. So a few sun catchers that are quilt oriented, and I have a few lapel pins. I love to make lapel pins. I don't know who enjoys lapel pins these days, but I love making them. And so I'm making like a few series. So I'll have two like a a lesser expensive option for folks to kind of just see some of my designs and something in the middle of the road. So, and aside from that, at the museum also I do a kids table activity. So I got like a whole package for the museum. But as far as some of my more lofty goals for projects, I currently have an installation on view at VAE in downtown Raleigh, which is a stack of televisions with stained glass as the screens and their light boxes. So that was a fun project I did, and it kind of set in motion me thinking of like, well, since I kind of made a name for myself with these sort of TVs as like a unique thing that I do, I eventually want to work on a solo exhibition sort of thing with the elevator pitch being a room of TVs set as channels, each TV in like a spot where folks can maybe walk up and there's 2 chairs where they could watch the TV, and it would just kind of be like have an interactive quality. That's something that I've been really inspired by, like less like big art with a capital A and like how much is this going to cost, and more like how can people just kind of hang around it and just like chill around the art. So that's kind of like I'm trying to find a way to make that like attractive, like not just like an awkward thing. So that's my next kind of big project, I think.
And when can people come see you in your studio?
Yeah, I'm a Monday, Tuesday man. So I usually am here on one of those 2 days. And my door is always open, both metaphorically and quite literally, because I'm right.
First Fridays, right?
We do the third Fridays here. Yeah, so yeah, we get some foot traffic third Fridays. We have a rotating exhibition space up front, and it's usually 2 or 3 artists every month kind of pair up and do their thing. So there's always something fun in the front room, and most of the artists are here on third Friday. All right, so today we're going to do a suncatcher tutorial, and I'm going to explain it all step by step, so come on in. Okay, well, hello again, everybody. Here we are. We have a full setup here, and I'm just going to do a demonstration on how to make stained glass from start to finish. So I figure I'd start with the basics of materials and tools. In the glass world, there are just a handful of tools needed to get started. Most of them are in front of me right now, and as well as a soldering iron. And there are also a variety of different types of glass, which I'll also talk about. So starting with the tools. The 2 most important tools are 2 varieties of the same type of thing. Glass cutters. So there are pencil grip glass cutters, which you would hold like a regular pencil. And there are pistol grip glass cutters, which are a little bit more ergonomically designed for, to kind of take the strain off of your wrist. So, some people like one or the other. I prefer a pencil grip. It's just a little bit more easier for me to use. Other than the glass cutters, of course, lots of pens, pencils, and markers for marking stuff. Then you'll have 2 different types of pliers. So there are, these are called grossing pliers. They're good for helping you snip off little pieces of glass, as well as sizing down the edge profiles of glass. So these are probably the ones you'll be using most often. I'd say these run somewhere between $15 or so for a pair of these. And these glass cutters can run anywhere between $15 and $50 depending on the make or brand, but they'll all kind of get you started. These pliers are called running pliers. Running pliers are really good for long straight cuts. They have a little concave divot here, so when you press it on your score line, it's just going to send your cut straight through. So it's good if you're doing a lot of the same type of cut. So we got cutters, we got pliers. Another good tool to have, I think it's called a FID. I forget the name of this off the top of my head, but this is good for helping you smooth down your copper foil. This is mainly used for the foiling process of stained glass. So this is a good one to have so you're not using your fingers. Those are all the handhelds, I think. Of course, a soldering iron is definitely, a good, this is one tool to not skimp on the price. Getting at least a mid-range one is definitely good. It'll save you some trouble down the road to have a soldering iron that has good heat control and can help melt solder efficiently. With the soldering iron, two other things you'll need are some solder flux. This helps retin your solder, so that basically means the tip of your solder is not getting oxidized or rusty, and it allows for the smooth flowing of the molten solder to adhere to your copper lines. So I know a lot of that might kind of sound like new terminology, but it'll of course make sense as we go along. Other things to talk about before I get into the glass. The thing that all of my tools are sitting on, the name I also don't know, but it knows many forms. This is mainly for when you cut glass on it, your tiny little pieces of glass and the shards will fall into this grate here, so you're not, wrestling with all of those sharp pieces of glass. So very handy for safety's sake. These, just a ruler or a straight edge. This is one specifically for glass cutting. It holds on to an edge of glass like this, and it can run a straight cut. So this is a good handheld. I have also made, and many other glass artists that I follow have something similar, is a kind of a jig. So this wooden thing that I've fabricated here has a straight bar on the bottom and a swinging bar depending on the kind of cut I want to make with glass. So I usually just have it positioned at a 90-degree angle, and it's great for sliding glasses under and doing things in quick succession. So this is a lifesaver for some big projects. And I think that is the everything. Oh, last but not least, I forgot copper foil. So I mean, the two types of glass work really come down to copper foil, which is best for hobbyists. It's pretty inexpensive to get, and this goes around every piece of glass that you cut to give it an edge profile of metal for your solder to adhere to, and that's how people, if they fuse their glass. This is a weird piece that I will use to just show the other type of method. So this is called lead cam. This is a pre-cut channels. This was actually on the bottom of a wine bottle. Some gentleman that I'm friendly with in town has fabricated these, but basically instead of the copper foil, which is adhesive and sticks to the edges, this is pre-cut channels that you'd cut and you'd snake around the edge in a similar fashion, but there's no adhesion, and instead of soldering the entire perimeter, you're just soldering little junction points. So less solder work on these, more cutting channels. So this is a little more substantial. It's better for larger works of stained glass. Like if you're doing church windows, always 9 times out of 10, they're going to be using this type of method as opposed to the copper foil. Whereas if you're familiar with like Tiffany stained glass and those lampshades, they're using something like this. So before getting into like any hands-on glass cutting stuff, the first thing that you'll always have to do is design what type of piece you'd like to make. So there's lots of resources for that also. Luke, would you actually be able to pass me a book that's behind you, the one that's on the top? Cool. So there's lots of resources to help with the design process. This is there's several hundred books out there that you can choose from. I like this artist. His name's Ed Siddett Jr. So if you're just looking, if you'd like a design that's already made, these are great. This one has templates that are already designed. So for example, these ones are for mirrors, and they have like the size that you'll be cutting already. So this is good if you just want to, you're not as keen on doing your own design and like to see what else is out there. Highly recommend checking out some beginner books to try out. I like to sketch up a lot of my own, so of course if you have a sketchbook you can start crafting up some shapes, but once you've already gotten past the sketching process and you're ready to start cutting glass, you can start picking out your colors and all that. So I can also talk about the types of glass that we have now here. So I guess the two main types of stained glass are it can be broken down into opaque glass and transparent or translucent glass work. So this is a piece of opaque glass. So the color, is pretty true to form just looking at it. So it's not as transparent as say this piece, which is a piece of red transparent glass. So these are two varieties here. As you can see, the main difference between them is the transparent glass. The color is best appreciated through light that passes through it. So, you know, that's one way to think about how using the application of this. The opaque glass, I've started leaning into a little bit more in my practice. It passes light just as well, maybe a little bit less luminosity with it, but you can see the color on it, so it kind of has two forms, which I think of opaque glass. You can see it and appreciate it without light, and you can appreciate it even more with light. I use mirror as well, so in this piece here, you know, this is a piece that has some copper foil already wrapped around it. Mirror cuts just the same as all other types of glass. Glass comes in different thicknesses and textures as well, so that can sometimes, you know, be a factor in your cutting of the glass, but you kind of learn how to cut each one as you work with it a little bit more. So yeah, now we can start a little bit of a demonstration here. So I will be using a pencil grip cutter for this glass demonstration. And a handy dandy permanent marker just for the markups here. So I have, might not have been apparent from the camera, but I have just a big sheet of clear glass, which is fairly thin. It's about an 1/8 inch thick, which is optimal for cutting glass on the thinner side. Glass can go as thick as 3/16 of an inch or sometimes even 1/4 inch, which is harder to cut. But for this demonstration, it's just an 1/8 inch thick sheet of glass. So I'm going to draw a couple different shapes to show you how the cuts work on here. For starters, I'll draw a straight line down just to divide it, divide the glass. And I'll just start by doing this first cut, and then I'll break these into two. So you can do these freehand if you have a steady hand. And for this exact example, it might be good to use one of these, so I'll show you this. You can kind of hold this up right here, and you'll take your glass cutter. You can pull down or you can push up. I think for longer cuts, I like to kind of do a pull down method. So you would just do this, and you're kind of listening for a click. A click is, or kind of a scratchy sound, that's kind of letting you know that you're getting a good score. So once you've scored your piece of glass, you could either snap it with your hands. If you feel more comfortable, you can snap it with the grozing pliers. I'll do it with this one just to show you how this works. So this one here, boom. And it runs the cut straight down. These ones are stuck because I have a little copper foil on it. And you got your two pieces of glass. Now with this one, I'll demonstrate some other qualities of glass, namely straight line cut for this one. Glass wants to run in straight lines, so you know, designs that have mostly parallel straight lines, you know, that's gonna be an easier design for you to cut. Let's say for the next level of, you know, an advanced level of cutting, a curve cut. So these ones are a little different, and I'll probably need to get me a slightly better marker. That one's the one. There we go. So a curve cut. These ones are a little trickier, but that's a pretty shallow curve. So we'll do that one first. We'll do a deeper curve for this one, and then maybe for this shape, I'll show you like a squiggle just to see like the levels of, you know, how challenging they can be. So I won't use a straight edge for these ones. So let's see, now the first cut again, I'm gonna just follow the trace line. And I got that one here. So these ones, most of them you can always just snap with your hands. There we go. And you know, you can disregard the copper foil on there, but that one snaps really easily. For a curved cut, this one, after scoring, it might be one that I can break just as easily, but in the event that it is not, and I'll show you here, we'll go just follow the line as close as you can. So now we have the score, and what I'll try and do first is just to see if it breaks, because I'll demonstrate what would happen on the next one otherwise. So that one broke just fine. This clear glass is usually pretty problem-free. There's not many, you know, surprises with it. This one's a little deeper, so I'm not going to try breaking it on the first try like that. We'll do the same. Let's see. Sometimes you can use, you know, just to get a steady cut, you can use your other hand as well. So I have the cut here. It's been scored, but what's good to do for some of these, just to kind of coerce your score line to break a little bit more openly, you can take the bottom of your glass cutter, and under the cut, you kind of, you make this very pleasant sound. You just kind of tap it along the score line, and you'll notice you can kind of see how the crack already started to form a little bit more. So that's going to help it cut. And I probably, even though this one may break in a less than opportune way, but you can kind of see, you can kind of, with your fingers here, as a good rule of thumb, and one thing I did not mention at the beginning is safety first, everybody. Gloves are good, but when you've been doing it a long time, you kind of know how glass breaks, so you can do it a little better. This one is a deep cut, so I can hear it. You can kind of listen and feel how a glass is going to break. So I might want to go back and do this one again, just a little bit, and then voila, it comes out just as you cut it. It just takes a little bit extra, a little help with that one. So you can do cuts that deep, as long as you just, you can just kind of go nice and slow with that one. This one is going to be a tricky one. It curves in two directions. So this one is also one that you can do. It's probably just on the upper end of what is considered a challenging glass cut. So I'll try this one as well. Let's see here. And sometimes when you're sitting down, certain cuts are hard to get at. So, you can stand up and put your weight into it, because like I mentioned before, this is better for supporting your wrist, whereas this one just has a little bit more, accessibility dexterously wise. Yep, once again, got our cut here, and here we go. I'm gonna just do the same thing I did before, trying to find a good spot to hold it. I can already see that a line is forming here, and you kind of just follow it down. All right, so I think at this point the crack has run all the way. I can kind of hear it trying to break free, but because it has this curve, it's trying to find a way that it wants to break most freely. So this one might be the one that, let's see, we're close, I can feel it. And I'd say that's about as much as you'd want to do before it kind of gets crazy. That one may stay like that. It might not break out the right way, because what will happen in an example like this is too deep of two cuts. They're both kind of going in there a good deal. So if it does break, this has a good chance of not being like a complete cut as I intended. It might break off to the side. You can still kind of hear it, but I won't even try to complete that one. That one was too ambitious of a cut. It still can be cut. There's tools like a scroll saw. Sorry, not a scroll saw. A ring saw. A ring saw is for more advanced glass work, which can essentially cut any shape you want. If you can see in this piece behind me, this piece would have been a fantastic example of something to cut with a ring saw, because you can get into these areas, because that is a very challenging cut to make as well. So that's a tool that's available to people who are doing more adventurous sort of glass work. I guess I can also talk about, if you have this piece that I have on the table next to me, which I'll be, showcasing some more parts of stained glass. If you needed to trace a piece, so I have, let's say this is a piece of colored glass, and I needed to get 4 more of these. Some people have different methods. I typically have a sheet that I'm working off of, and I'll have a light box to shine light through so I can see below and trace onto the glass I'm cutting. For example, like this one, if you have pre-cuts, you can trace directly onto there. Some people who have access to a laser cutting vinyl machine, that's some way that I've seen professional glass artists trace their pieces. You can put vinyl on the face of your stained glass, and you can just cut directly off of that. But a lot of times I just do something as simple of, we'll just hold this piece up here. I'll just get a light sort of marking on it. So it's going to be slightly different. Like if I trace this directly onto the sheet, you'll have to account for the width of your marker. So you might want to size it down a little bit further. But for the sake of this, I'll just show you how I might cut this piece out of a sheet. I'll start by picking a side to run the score line all the way down. So I'll do that. And then we have one side cut here. And then I'll go and just snip off the other ones. Let's see here. Got that one. You can also score several at once. They often will still do their own breaks and not interfere with each other. So I'll do the same with this one. And I'll save this one for last. So I have 2 score lines here. And I'll use these this time. I'm using these most of the time. So you can just hold it up here and breaks it right off. Do the same on this side. And because this is kind of inset, I'll stick with this one, the running pliers. It'll snap that. And for the last one, let's see. Voila, a little glass square. A little messier than the other square that I have, but it'll get the job done. What you would do after you cut all of the pieces of your glass, a very handy tool and definitely recommended to pick up. It's more expensive than some of the handheld tools that I have here. But a glass grinder, which I have on this side over here, which I'll walk over to demonstrate. So this tool here is basically got a rotating bit that has, kind of abrasive edge to it, and you pour water into here so that it's not heating up and cracking your glass as you grind it. But sometimes, like, even though this one broke pretty clean, there's not like an edge to it. A lot of times glass will have kind of sharp and dangerous edge. So when you're foiling, you definitely want to sand that down so you don't injure yourself. So this one you turn on, and it doesn't go on. Let's see. I'll put that here instead. So yeah. Take 2. This one you turn on, and the bit rotates, and it's pulling water from a sponge behind it and under it. So you might just do something like this. And just with that alone, the little grinder is going to knock off the edge of your glass and just kind of make it nice and smooth. So that is a very helpful thing to have. And yeah, lots of pieces I'll make. I'm spending a lot of time on that, just making sure they don't have, kind of dangerous edges that I have to touch. So great. So that's the cutting portion of stained glass. On to the next step, which is foiling. In this case, you can also do, the lead cam method, as I mentioned. But this piece here, which I'll switch to, is a piece that I'm working on for the museum's upcoming quilt exhibition. So this is barn quilt inspired. And all of the pieces on here have been cut and sanded. So that's why they're a little, they have some splotches on there because the sanding will leave some residue. And the next step, which is a time-consuming one, but it's kind of therapeutic in a way. You can kind of just tune out and do your own thing. And some people have different methods of applying this as well. They make these little troughs that these sit in this way, and you can pull your tape out and it rolls. I have adopted this homebrew method, which I recommend for most, if you don't have one of those, it's good. You can get your tape started here. And I just like to wear it on my wrist because it keeps it close by. So this is, I usually just have it like that. And I'll start with one piece here. Let's see. Perfect piece to start with, just a little green square. So you take your foil, and what you're going to want to do, this is definitely a practice makes perfect part of the process. You'll basically take your tape and you'll sit one corner of your piece down as flush in the middle as you can so that there's an even amount of tape on both sides. From there, you'll just walk it around the whole thing. So you'll keep that same sort of process in mind, just right in the middle, try not to have it deviate to one side because you want to have an even representation of the tape. And as you go along, especially for straight cut pieces like this, I usually fold it over, while I'm going along. So you get, you just push it with your fingers on the edge. This part might look dangerous, but it's much safer than you realize because once this copper foil is between you and the glass, it's not going to really cut you as much as you'd think, but still, of course, take precaution. So yeah, keeping it going around. And you can get pretty quick with this, especially depending on your piece. And let's see. And then once you get to the end, you can snip it if you'd like. You can also just tear it just as easily. And then you have yourself a wrapped piece. Now, from here, it's a good rule of thumb to then take your fid, and then you can use whichever side you'd like, but you're going to do it on every side. You run this over the surface to really get the tape nice and smooth, because there will be some bubbles in it. You'll notice on this side over here, there's just like, it's a little, got a crease. So we got that. Kind of just do that and go over this side, smooth those out. So now the tape is also just going to be stuck on there much better, so that when you do solder this, it will adhere to it nicely, and it won't come up or anything. So we got that. So that's one piece done, and now I just got to do all of the rest of them. So I'll demonstrate that for a few other pieces as well. Let's see. This is a piece of opaque green glass that we started out with, and then this is a piece of really cool transparent purple glass. Glass, varies. If you're shopping for glass, there's, I should have mentioned earlier, there's a handful of places you can go. If you're in the Triangle area, there is a stained glass store called Carolina Stained Glass. They have every tool under the sun, so you can get everything from the basics to more advanced tools there, and they have every type of glass. And glass definitely varies based, the pricing of it varies based off of color and texture. There's fewer and fewer glass makers in the world these days, but there's still a lot of people making some really great glass. So that being said, I meant to mention, like, purple, red, and pink glasses are a little, not rarer, because you definitely will find them abundantly, but you'll notice some price differences among the colors, is what I mean to say. So for this piece, we'll do that's one of the, comes with the territory. If you have it wrapped around your wrist, you're going to get a little tangled up here. All right, let's see. We got this one. And I'll do the same thing, start at the corner usually. And just kind of work your way around. Because the tape is so thin, you don't have to worry about doubling up so much. If you need to, just to make something kind of more plumb, you can totally do so. Yeah, usually just once around is all you need. There we go. All right. And then, just keep smoothing it as you go along. And we got another piece. Perfect. All right, and yeah, so you can, as you're foiling, I just like to work off of the pattern. I set them, loosely into position. Sometimes people will have a wooden or foam board that they'll set pins to hold the shape so that nothing loses, especially when you're using the lead cam method. Since everything is kind of floating around with these things in them, you'll kind of want to pin them down at angles so that they don't move much on you. But since this is a pretty easy puzzle to reassemble, I'm just going to keep it going as is, and occasionally ripping off the extra paper from your tape just so it doesn't get in the way. I'll do a couple more of these ones before we move on to the next step. Oh, so let's see. Yeah, other costs here. I can. So I mentioned a few. Like on average, let's say our two, I'll take it from the top. Yeah, we have about 15 to 25 for these guys. These will be 15 to 50 depending on, because this is definitely an important tool. Copper tape is typically between $10 and $20 for a roll, and it lasts for a long time, so you can, it's doesn't necessarily, it's not a per project sort of price, but I'd say between $10 and $20 for a roll of copper tape. And these are like maybe $5. Another big expense, so solder, which I'll get to shortly. These ones, a full roll of this is usually about $25. So that's definitely something to consider when starting a big project, how much of that you'll need. So let's see, we're doing this one. Okay. Great, so in that short span of time, we have done foiled 3 pieces. We have gotten, this one segment of the piece foiled. In a perfect world, we will have the whole piece foiled and you'll solder it all at once. But for the sake of the demonstration, I'll just show how we solder for this half, and you can kind of finish it later. So I will shift this part over to the side here, just so it's not in the way. There we go. So you can see the design beneath it, and we will have, the first step in the soldering process is you'll want to get your soldering iron started over here. It's a good rule of thumb. It's, here's a little extra info on this too. So soldering irons, they require flux on the front end and the back end. So your pieces are going to need to be flux, which is the liquid that you apply to the surface to help the metal stick. But also your soldering iron, as you continue to solder, it will accrue some slag or some impurities from the metal on the surface of it. And as it does that, it'll make it less effective. So you're going to want to clean that off. So you can start as it's heating up by having a wet sponge or paper towel here just to get off some of the maybe pre-existing slag. And then you can also, this, which creates a little bit of smoke from time to time, is a paste flux, which you can typically dip your soldering iron into and it retins it. So right now it's good to go. I'll also mention masks are very good for this step of the process. It creates a little bit of smoke, and I always have a fan going on the side, and I usually always wear a mask just for safety. Because that's not probably good to breathe in, but for the sake of the small demonstration, it's all fine. So once the soldering iron's good to go, what I will then do is take this version of flux, which is called safety flux. It's easier to work with. Some people prefer paste flux, but I like this one because it flows nicely. And then you get yourself a little brush, and you will then, once it's on your brush, go over your surfaces, and you can let them shift at this point because I'm going to reposition them, and you can kind of brush it on the areas that you're going to be soldering. So namely, all the lines that run through the piece are definitely getting soldered. The ones towards the edges, I'm not going to immediately solder. There will be a metal band that once this piece is finished will go around it. So I'll try and leave those without flux just so that nothing gets to that corner. But yes, right here, so now everything has been kind of fluxed here. And I will then refer to my blueprint and see what we have just to make sure it's relatively in line. Also, in a perfect world, you'll want everything to all of the sides to mash up perfectly, but there's a little bit of attrition, wiggle room you can account for. If it's just very close, that's totally fine as well. The solder will work just the same. So here I feel good about that. We're going to line that up. And there we go. Just getting everything into position. And it's looking nice and plumb and square. Sometimes some people will take a straight edge like this and just line it up to the side just to make sure it's all looking good there. And do the same on this side. So once we have it into this, a position that's good enough for soldering, like that. Last but not least, this is definitely the step where you want to make sure it's all nice and lined up, and that's good. That's good right there. So I will cap off my flux and move on to this step. So I also did not mention, this is another thing in soldering. It's a sal ammoniac block, which is a chemical that I could not fully describe to you, but what it does do is it does something similar to these two steps of the process. If you have a lot of slag, it will, if you rub the tip over it, it will retin it as well. So it does a similar function to that. So now I'll take my solder, which is a 60-40 blend. The other variety it comes in is a 50-50 blend. So this is tin and lead, a mixture, 60% tin, 40% lead. I prefer 60-40, and most other stained glass artists will agree with me. It is just, it melts faster. 50-50 is maybe a bit stronger, but it will melt slower. Moving on to this part over here, we'll have the design, and I will pick, I don't know what it's actually called, but I call this part tack welding. We're trying to get everything held together so it's not shifting around as you continue to solder it. So you'll take a bit of solder, and I'm just gonna tap it right there, and those two pieces are now loosely joined. So you kind of just move around the piece, and you just do that at every junction point, because it's not, you don't have to worry about this part looking pretty necessarily. It's just there to hold on to the neighboring piece. So you just keep tacking this on, and so on and so forth. And once you get to the very last piece, you'll be able to kind of move this around, and you won't be shackled down to your design if you need to move it off it and you don't want to get it all marred up to use it again for a future project. There we go. So once that kind of does its thing, just to demonstrate, yep, you can now move your piece around and everything's attached. So it doesn't really matter if it's in the exact same line as that one. So from here, I might, sometimes I'll, just to make sure that none of the flux has dried prematurely, you might just take your flux brush and just go over the edges again, just to kind of get them loaded up. You can get it on the face of the glass because it'll wash off later. And let's see here. I'll do the same. So now for this one, I'm going to go over each line. And you're going to want to take your time with this one, because sometimes, depending on the soldering iron you have, it might lag up a little bit. It might not melt as smoothly. So if you take your time, you'll get a more consistent bead, as they call it. A bead is just like the smoothness of the line you have there. So I'll start with this one, and we're going to let it sit there for a second. And as it starts to kind of melt, I'm just going to start pulling it in this direction. You'll notice it's got a nice little consistent mound of solder going over the surface of it, like that. And then you get to the end. So you can kind of assess, you'll need to do micro adjustments with your soldering as you finish a project, because as certain lines meet, they might have a snag in the line as well. This one looks nice and good, so we'll move on from this one to the next one. And then you just kind of slowly pull it through. This one I went a little too quick. You can kind of see it was a little shallower on this side, so I might come back and pull it into the next part. There we go. Great, and that one came out pretty good too. Might just go back and try and get the bubbles. Yeah, that's about the kind of quality of line we're looking for there. Yep, so like this part right here, you'll notice it bled into that one. This is usually a point where if folks are, beginners at stained glass and starting to solder for the first time, they'll end up going back to adjust these a lot, because you'll do this maybe, where you start on this side to try and get it so it's a nice smooth junction, and it'll affect this one, so you'll have to go back and fix that. So I'll just run this one all the way down and see where it gets us. So that one was okay, of a line. I'll put a little bit more. The more the merrier with this part of the process, because you want your pieces looking good, and if there's a lot of solder on it, it's gonna, a little too much solder is better than a little too little solder. So that is another good one. And I guess for this, I'll just run over the entire shape. I feel that I can, knock that out pretty quickly with how this is working out. So keep it moving. Soldering iron's nice and hot now, so it's flowing a little bit more freely. Let's see. There we go. All right, so that one came out pretty good, and we'll move on to this square. Sometimes you can just pull off little pieces of your solder coil and just put them right on, as opposed to, yeah, get that back on there. And yeah, this is a good time to mention that. There'll be times where you'll drip solder and it'll come on there. Once it cools down, it'll just scratch right off, so it doesn't affect the glass. Great, and let's see, just a couple more to go here. On pieces, so this piece has almost exclusively straight lines. Those compositions are easier to solder because when you're working with a curved piece, just managed to pick a little bit of that up. When you're working with a curved piece, the solder cools in stranger ways, so it just takes a little bit more time to get them consistently soldered. Let's see. All right, and moving on to the last two. And now, yeah, this I've had some challenges with this step of the process. I had a not so great soldering iron the first time I started doing stained glass, and yeah, I learned that that's why you get a good one. You get a good soldering iron, and you'll, let me see here. There we go. Yeah, that's looking good. I'll probably clean this off just a smidge, because yeah, I noticed it was starting to snag a little bit as I was pulling it through. I might get a quick little dip in my flux again, just to make everything run smoothly again. And let's finish this one up. Great. All right, so I might go back and fix a line or two, but for the most part, those are all looking really good. And so this stage in the process, you can kind of see what sort of colors you're working with. So, you know, this will be some light action as you pick it up. You can see how certain colors like the blue, you can see just from looking at it, but also you can, you know, as you hold it up to the light, you'll get a little bit more luminosity, whereas the pieces like the purple and the red are now starting to appear a little bit more colorful because you can see the light through them. So this is usually the step of the process where I'll just see what kind of color choices I've made and how they work out. You are, depending on your project, you can get away with not soldering the back. And what I mean by that is, for example, on the TVs that I work with, only one side of my stained glass is ever in view. So I typically will only solder the front of it, and it holds it just fine. For pieces that are being viewed from both sides, and especially if you're trying to just make them as structurally sound as possible, always recommended to do the same on both sides. So you'll solder your whole piece, flip it over, and then solder the back as well. So, yep. That is the soldering portion of stained glass. And for the next part, which because I have a sink outside of my studio and, you know, requires some running around, I will just verbally describe what you'll do after this step of the process. So once you get to this part, your whole piece is soldered, you're gonna need to kind of rigorously clean it. So you'll have, you know, residue from the flux and the solder, you know, just kind of impurities in the solder. So the next step you'll want to do is, if you have a sink or even just a tub that you can set some water in, you'll wash it off first. We recommend, us stained glass artists recommend Blue Dawn dish soap. It works magic in just getting all the grime off. It really cleans, you know, get like a toothbrush if you would like, maybe the coarse side of a sponge. Get some soap on that, and you're going to want to lightly scrub your whole piece, making sure you're getting the stained glass, the solder lines, because it's going to remove any of the flux residue, and it's going to remove some of the impurities in the metal. The main reason you want to do that, aside from cleaning it up, is because the next step, a lot of people will then patina their glass. So once you've cleaned up all of your glass, you can decide whether or not you want to leave it with this this sheen of metal. You can, if you're into just you know, silvery metal, then that's great. You can leave it there. I typically patina all of my projects black, and this one works very well. There is another type of patina called, it's just copper patina. So it's basically, it tries to restore the color of your solder lines to the color of your copper tape there. And it's really beautiful. That one is a little bit more challenging to get as true to the color as you want. A lot of times folks will be discouraged when they try the copper patina because it doesn't work as quickly and consistently as the black one does. I don't chemically know why, but you need to clean, if you intend on soldering your, or patinaing your piece copper, you need to clean it a little bit more rigidly, and you may want to use something like baking soda, I've heard, is a good thing to apply to your glass, and scrub it over there, because that really just sets it over, and it makes the copper patina really pop. After I've cleaned it, you'll get a little cup, you'll put some of the patina in, and you'll brush it over just as liberally as I did with the flux. You'll notice a pretty immediate effect, and for the sake of the video, I will just demonstrate this. It's going to be a little less, the color might be a little less poppy than it would be if I had cleaned it, but you'll at least be able to see the effect that is applied. So I have just a little cap here. I'll set that in the middle, and I'll dip my patina brush. I have different brushes for each one. So yeah, I'll have a brush for my flux, a brush for the patina, and a third brush for the polishing, which I'll explain next. So with that, this is unclean, but let's just see how quickly it works here. You'll brush it over the surface, and you can almost immediately see that that just turns black. It makes your pieces really bold and look finished, and I love doing them that way. But not everyone is a fan of the black patina, so definitely find out which one works best for you, and keep on rolling with that. So we've cleaned, we've patinaed, and the last step is after you patina, it's recommended, as opposed to taking it to the sink and doing the same kind of cleaning that you did in the first half, it's best to get like a rag or a napkin or whichever you prefer to kind of blot out the patina that's sitting there, because you want to let the patina do its work. It wants to soak into the metal as best as it can and really alter it and make it look like that color. So as opposed to rinsing it all off, just kind of blot it and scrub it out a little bit, because that way it's still kind of impacted into your solder lines. The very last step for this part will be to use some wax polish. So this is a mixture of, I believe, some kind of oil, and it's got like wax particles in there. So when you shake it up, they get simultaneously suspended in there. And what you do with this is you'll take a brush and you'll just apply it over your entire surface of your piece, and you let it dry. It'll turn white, chalky white once it's dried, and then what that does is it creates a sealing barrier over your solder lines, so it's not as exposed to the elements just like through the air. So it creates a thin layer of protectant, and it also helps make it shine, and it polishes it. So with your rag, you'll basically buff over your whole surface, and you'll notice that not only your solder lines get brighter, but also your glass will kind of just pop a little bit as well. So it really adds a nice final touch. And that all the way through is all the steps involved in making a stained glass piece. You can then decide, once it's all assembled like this, if you can imagine that all these pieces are together, how would you frame this piece? How would you, do you want to display it on a wall, in a window? I like to use copper foil for this part, but on the edges of my stained glass piece, I like to use lead cam like this. So you'll notice this piece has this all the way around. It adds for a nice, smooth, and bold finish. So you can cut them each to size for each side of your piece, and as you put this material on the edges of your piece, you'll solder it at the junction points so that it really makes your piece structurally stable, and then once you pick it up off the table, it's going to look nice and yeah, finished, and you can patina that as well. So that will create a completed piece. You can add some little jumper rings to the edge of the stained glass, and you can hang a chain if you'd like to. That can also be a point where you hang nails. So that's really up to you depending on where it's going to be hung. And after that, you got all the tools you need to get started on your first project. Stained glass is a much more, I always tell people who are interested in it, it might look like an intimidating practice, but it's much more accessible than people realize, as long as you get, these starting tools here, which I'd probably place, to get started in stained glass, $150 is a good like budget, because you'll get all your tools, and that will still save room for you to get a pretty decent soldering iron. Some of the other tools you might want or need can be purchased on the back end as you find use for them. And so with that budget in mind, you'll get, start to accrue some glass. Glass, of course, will, be costly, but there are ways to get it more inexpensively depending on where you go. As I mentioned, there's a store in Durham called Carolina Stained Glass. They're wonderful, and it's a good place to get stained glass. You can go to Hobby Lobby if you need to get started. They have a stained glass aisle as well for hobbyists. So I hope that you all have enjoyed this practice. I really appreciate you tuning along and watching me work. And feel free to reach out to me directly if you have any questions or want to talk shop. I'm always here.